There's a brainwave frequency that only 1% of the world's population consistently emits. And I'm not talking about spirituality or mysticism. I'm talking about pure neuroscience, lab data, real measurements that Stanford University has confirmed in recent years. Carl Jung mapped this frequency over 100 years ago, without any technology. He called it innate sensitivity, a characteristic he observed in just a small fraction of his patients, people who felt things before they happened, who walked into rooms and immediately picked up on the energy of everyone present, who woke up in the middle of the night knowing that something was wrong with someone they loved. Jung was ridiculed for these observations. The scientific establishment said it was mysticism, that it was pseudoscience, that it was impossible to measure something as subjective as emotional frequency. 100 years later, Andrew Huberman and his team at Stanford proved that Jung was right all along. They measured it, they quantified it, they documented in peer-reviewed studies that there is a distinct brainwave frequency that only a tiny percentage of the population emits consistently. And the most disturbing thing isn't that this frequency exists. The most disturbing thing is that the research community suppressed this discovery for decades, because it validates everything Jung said about human nature, about the collective unconscious, about the connection between minds that materialist science refuses to accept. If you've felt different your entire life, if people have always said that you're too intense, too sensitive, that you feel things too deeply, this video will neurologically explain why that is, and it will reveal what this rare frequency means for your life, but your relationships, and your destiny, because it's no coincidence that you're watching this right now. The same frequency that makes you different is the same frequency that brought you here. But before we go any further, I need you to understand something fundamental. What I'm about to reveal in the next few minutes is not theory. It's not speculation. It's the synthesis of 100 years of deep psychology with the most recent discoveries in neuroscience. And it's exactly why this knowledge has been suppressed. Because when you unite Jung with Huberman, when you connect profound wisdom with scientific validation, you uncover truths about human nature that deeply threaten established power. Truths about who you really are, and about why the system wants you to believe you're just another face in the crowd. Let's start with what Jung discovered in 1921. In his book, Psychological Types, he described a phenomenon he called innate sensitivity. Jung noticed that certain patients possessed what he called a special way of experiencing events. These patients didn't just react to the environment, they absorbed the environment. They felt the emotions of others as if they were their own. They picked up on invisible tensions in rooms before a single word was spoken. Jung wrote that these people possessed a kind of invisible antenna, tuned to frequencies that most human beings simply cannot pick up. The scientific community of the time ridiculed these observations. They said Jung had abandoned science and entered mysticism, that he was inventing concepts without empirical basis. What they didn't know is that Jung was describing something that neuroscience would only be able to measure 100 years later. He was seeing the future, and the future proved he was right. Now here's what Huberman and modern researchers have discovered. The human brain operates at different brainwave frequencies: beta, alpha, theta, delta, gamma. Most people spend most of their time in beta waves. It's the normal waking state, logical thinking, linear processing. It's when you're awake, working, talking, doing your daily activities. Alpha waves appear when you relax, when you close your eyes, when you meditate superficially. Most people can access alpha with relative ease. But here's where things get interesting. Theta waves are much deeper. Theta is the state between awake and asleep. It's where the deepest insights occur, where creativity explodes, where connections that the conscious brain would never make become obvious. Most people only access theta for brief moments before falling asleep or just after waking up. They pass through theta, but they can't remain there. What neuroscience studies have revealed is that approximately 1% of the population can maintain theta waves while completely awake and functional. These people operate at a brainwave frequency different from most of humanity. And it's not something they choose, it's how their brain was wired from birth. But hold on, because what I'm about to reveal completely changes the context of this discovery. Jung didn't just describe these people, he explained why they exist. And this is where the connection between deep psychology and neuroscience becomes chilling. Jung believed that certain people are born with a more direct connection to what he called the collective unconscious. Not the personal unconscious where we store our individual memories and wounds, but something much larger, a layer of consciousness shared by all of humanity. Where the archetypes reside, the universal patterns of behavior and symbolism that transcend cultures and eras. Jung wrote that people with innate sensitivity have what he called a thinner veil between individual consciousness and the collective unconscious. While most people live completely isolated by this veil, these rare people can perceive what's on the other side. They feel the archetypes moving. They pick up on patterns that the ordinary mind cannot see, and that's why they know things before they happen. That's why they sense people before they meet them. That's why they wake up in the middle of the night when someone they love is in danger. Huberman's neuroscience now explains the mechanism behind this. And the discovery is so elegant. It seems impossible that Jung could have described it without technology. The brains of people with dominant theta waves show massive activation in a structure called the insula. The insula is a hidden region in the cerebral cortex that functions as a center of interoception. It constantly reads the physiological state of the body. Every heartbeat, every change in breathing, every micro-muscle tension. But the insula doesn't just read the person's own body. Recent studies have shown that people with a hyperactive insula can literally feel the physiological state of people nearby. Their mirror neurons are so developed that they automatically mirror what's happening in the nervous system of those around them. Think about that. When you walk into a room and immediately sense that something is off. When you look at someone and know they're hurting, even if they're smiling. When you wake up at 3 in the morning with a strange feeling and discover later that someone important was in crisis at that very moment. This isn't mystical intuition. It's your hyperactive insula doing its job. It's your brain operating at a frequency that most people simply don't have access to. And here's the part no one talks about. The scientific establishment has known about this for years. There are studies dating back 2 decades documenting the neurological differences in highly sensitive people. Researchers at Stony Brook University have mapped that 15 to 20% of the population has traits of heightened awareness. But within that group, there's an even rarer 1%. People whose brains are permanently tuned to theta wave frequencies. People whose insula is so developed that they literally can't help but feel what others feel. Why has this been suppressed? Why doesn't the research community celebrate these findings? Because they validate Jung. And validating Jung means admitting that materialistic psychology has been wrong for a century. It means admitting that there's something greater than the individual brain. That consciousness can be shared. That there are people who access information in ways that conventional science can't fully explain. And that threatens the scientific establishment too much. Threatens too much the pharmaceutical industry, which profits billions by convincing sensitive people that they have disorders that need to be medicated. Threatens too much the system that needs you to believe that you're just a biological machine, with no deep connection to anything larger. But let's delve even deeper. Because if you're one of these rare people, you need to understand what this means for your life. Jung described that people with innate sensitivity go through a very different journey than the rest of humanity. He observed that while most people live comfortably on the surface of consciousness, sensitive people are constantly pulled into the depths. They can't ignore the shadow. They can't pretend that internal conflicts don't exist. They're forced to confront truths about themselves that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. This creates a painful paradox. On one hand, these people have access to an inner richness that most will never experience. Profound insights, explosive creativity. the ability for emotional connection that transforms relationships. But on the other hand, they carry a burden that few understand. They feel the pain of the world constantly. They absorb the suffering of others as if it were their own. They're bombarded by stimuli that most people don't even realize exist. Huberman has explained neurologically why this happens. The same hyperactivity of the insula that allows them to feel others also means that their nervous system is constantly on alert. These people's amygdala fires much more easily. They enter a stress response with stimuli that, for most, would be neutral. Cortisol runs more frequently through their systems. The sympathetic nervous system stays activated for longer. And here's something crucial that Jung predicted and Huberman confirmed. These people need much more alone time than average. Not because they're antisocial, but because their nervous system needs recovery. Every social interaction consumes more energy for them than for normal people. Every new environment demands more processing. Every emotion from others that they absorb needs to be processed and released. Jung called this the need for deep introversion. Huberman explains it as the need for regulation of the autonomic nervous system. Different languages for the same phenomenon. Proof that deep wisdom and modern science are converging towards the same truth. But there's an aspect of this rare brainwave frequency that few discuss, and it's perhaps the most important of all. Jung observed that people with innate sensitivity have a specific function in humanity. He didn't believe that this characteristic was an evolutionary accident. He believed it was a deliberate design. These people function as collective antennas. They pick up changes in the psychic field of humanity before they manifest materially. They sense approaching crises. They perceive shifts in eras. They are the first to feel when something big is about to happen. Jung wrote that in moments of historical transition, these people become especially agitated. They feel a restlessness that they can't explain. Dreams become more vivid. Intuition becomes stronger. They pick up something that doesn't yet have a name. But that is forming in the collective unconscious. Look at the world now. Look at the agitation. At the feeling that something big is about to change. If you're one of these rare people, you're probably feeling this intensely. A restlessness that doesn't stop. A feeling that the world we know is about to transform. This isn't pathological anxiety. It's your antenna doing exactly what it was designed to do, picking up frequencies that most can't perceive. Huberman explained in his episodes on neuroplasticity that the brain is an adaptive machine. It changes according to the demands of the environment. And here's something fascinating. Studies show that people with dominant theta waves have much more active neuroplasticity than average. Their brains are constantly reconfiguring, adapting, evolving. It's as if the same frequency that allows them to feel more also allows them to change more quickly. This explains why sensitive people often go through dramatic transformations throughout their lives. Radical career changes, sudden spiritual awakenings, complete reconfiguration of values and beliefs. While most people change slowly over decades, these people can transform completely in months because their brain was designed for it. But there's a real danger that needs to be discussed, and it's something that both Jung and Huberman warned about. The same sensitivity that is a gift can become a curse if it's not properly managed. Jung saw many patients with innate sensitivity who were completely destroyed by it. Not because the sensitivity was bad, but because they didn't understand what they had. They tried to live like normal people. They forced themselves to endure levels of stimulation that their nervous system simply couldn't process. The result was collapse, deep depression, chronic anxiety, a feeling of being broken, in a world that seems to work for everyone but them. Huberman explained the neurological mechanism behind this collapse when the nervous system is constantly overloaded, without adequate recovery time. It enters a state called nervous exhaustion. The hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis becomes dysregulated. The cortisol rhythm inverts. A person wakes up exhausted and becomes agitated at night. The immune system weakens. The ability to concentrate plummets. And all of this happens not because the person is weak, but because they are trying to operate a Ferrari as if it were an economy car. The engine is more powerful. It needs different care. Jung prescribed what he called regular periods of inner retreat for these patients. Time alone in silence, contact with nature, contemplative practices. He discovered that when sensitive people honored their need for introversion, instead of fighting against it, all symptoms improved dramatically. Huberman confirms this with data. Practices like NSDR, which is non-sleep deep rest, meditation, exposure to nature, all these practices reduce the activation of the sympathetic nervous system and allow the hyperactive insula to have time to process everything it's absorbed. But hold on to that, because what I'm about to reveal now connects everything in a way you've probably never heard. Jung described in his private writings that he found a fascinating pattern among his sensitive patients. He noted that many of them had experiences he initially classified as emotional telepathy, not telepathy in the mystical sense of reading thoughts, but an ability to feel emotional states of people at a distance. Mothers who woke up in the middle of the night, at the exact moment their children were in danger, miles away. Friends who felt an inexplicable sadness that they later discovered coincided with a tragedy in the life of someone close. Couples who experienced the same emotions in different places, without any communication. Jung was fascinated by these accounts. He began to document hundreds of them and realized that they appeared disproportionately among people with innate sensitivity. The more sensitive the patient, the more frequent these experiences were. Jung called this emotional synchronicity, a connection that transcended space and time, almost like an antenna, as Jung described, picking up signals others can't perceive. The scientific establishment of the time had no way to explain this. Even today, conventional science prefers to ignore it. But recent studies in neuroscience are starting to offer fascinating explanations. Researchers have discovered that when two people have a deep emotional connection, their brainwave patterns begin to synchronize. This has been measured in studies with mothers and babies, with long-term couples, with best friends. Their brainwaves literally fall into phase, oscillate together, like two instruments playing the same song. And here's the most incredible thing. This synchronization was detected, even when people were in separate rooms, even when they couldn't see or hear each other. Somehow, in a way that science still can't fully explain, their brains remained connected, as if the veil between them thinned, allowing for a transfer of energy. Now think about this. If people with a rare frequency have dominant theta waves, if their brains are already naturally tuned to deeper frequencies, makes sense that they would have an easier time synchronizing with others, that they would feel these connections more intensely, that they would experience what Jung called emotional synchronicity much more often than average people. And this explains something that maybe you have experienced. That feeling of knowing someone was thinking about you moments before the phone rang. The intuition that something was wrong with a loved one, even without any objective evidence. The vivid dream with a person you hadn't seen in years, and discovering later that they were going through a crisis at that exact moment. It's not magic. It's neuroscience. That is still being understood, and your rare frequency, doing exactly what it was designed to do. But there is a dark side to this capability that Jung documented extensively, and that Huberman now confirms with neurological data. People with a rare frequency don't choose what they absorb. Their nervous system picks up everything indiscriminately. The pain of a stranger on the bus, the anxiety of a coworker, the repressed anger of a family member, all of this enters the system as if it were their own. And the brain needs to process each of these absorbed emotions. Jung observed that many of his sensitive patients suffered from something he called exhaustion by contamination. They arrived at his office completely exhausted, depressed, anxious. But when he investigated their lives, he discovered that there was nothing personally wrong. The problem was that they were carrying the emotions of dozens of other people, living emotional lives that were not their own. This creates a serious problem of identity. If you constantly feel emotions that are not yours, how do you know who you really are? How do you distinguish your sadness from the sadness absorbed from others? How do you find your own voice amid all this emotional noise? Jung developed a specific practice to help these patients. He called it emotional differentiation, a process of learning to identify and separate your own emotions from absorbed emotions. It was slow and delicate work. It required much introspection, but the results were transformative, like lifting a veil and seeing the world with clarity. Huberman validated this approach with neuroscience. He explains that the practice of introspection activates different brain circuits, and when you stop and ask, whose emotion is this really? You activate the medial prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for self-reference and metacognition. This process literally helps the brain categorize experiences as internal or external. And there is a specific protocol that combines Jung and Huberman that I'm going to share now. But here is the secret that unites everything: the protocol that combines Jung with Huberman in a way that neither of them could have created alone. People with a rare frequency need a completely different lifestyle. Not slightly different, completely different. They need to structure their days around their sensitivity instead of fighting against it. This means regular periods of absolute silence, not silence with background music or podcasts, real silence, where the nervous system can finally stop processing external stimuli and start to integrate everything it's absorbed. It means radically limiting exposure to news and social media. Every tragedy you see, every conflict you witness online, your insula is processing as if it were happening to you. Your nervous system doesn't know the difference between seeing a tragedy on the screen and witnessing a tragedy personally. The neurological impact is almost identical. It means choosing relationships with extreme care. The vibe you surround yourself with matters. People with rare innate sensitivity absorb the energy of those around them. If you spend time with toxic people, anxious people, negative people, you are literally absorbing that frequency into your system. And then you have to expend energy processing something that wasn't even yours to begin with. Protecting your energy isn't selfishness, it's neurological survival. And it means developing daily practices for energetic cleansing. Not in a mystical sense, but in a neurological sense. Practices that help your nervous system discharge what it has absorbed. This could be intense physical exercise. It could be controlled breathing. It could be time spent in nature. It could be cold water immersion. Anything that activates the parasympathetic nervous system and allows the body to release accumulated tension. Carl Jung called this psychic hygiene. Andrew Huberman calls it regulation of the autonomic nervous system. Again, different languages for the same truth. Let me give you the complete daily protocol that synthesizes all of this. In the morning, before any external stimulus, practice 5 minutes of absolute silence. No cell phone, no news, just you and your nervous system waking up naturally. Jung called this the sacred morning hour. Huberman explains that the first few minutes after waking are when the brain is most plastic. What you do during this period sets the tone for the entire day. After that, expose yourself to natural light for 10 minutes. Huberman has extensively documented how morning light regulates the circadian rhythm. For people with rare innate sensitivity, this is even more important because their nervous system deregulates more easily. During the day, practice regular disconnection breaks. Every 2 hours, take 5 minutes to do absolutely nothing. No stimulation, no directed thought. Just allow your nervous system to process what it has absorbed in the last few hours. In the evening, practice what Jung called the review of the day. Sit in silence and mentally review the experiences of the day. Ask yourself which emotions were genuinely yours and which you absorbed from others. This simple exercise activates the medial prefrontal cortex and helps your brain categorize and release what isn't yours. And before going to sleep, avoid any intense emotional stimulation. No news, no social media, no difficult conversations. Your nervous system needs time to slow down. Huberman documents that sensitive individuals need at least 1 hour of low stimulation before sleep, for sleep to be truly restorative. This protocol may seem simple, but don't be fooled. For people with rare innate sensitivity, it is transformative, because it finally respects how your nervous system really works. If you've made it this far in this video and identified with what I'm describing, if you felt that sensation of finally being seen, of finally understanding something about yourself that never made sense, this isn't coincidence. You have a responsibility now, not just to yourself, but to all those who don't yet know what they are, who are still suffering thinking they are defective, who are still trying to fit into a world that wasn't designed for people like them. In the last few minutes, you've discovered something that most people will never know, that there is a rare brainwave frequency that only 1% of the population emits. That Jung mapped this 100 years ago without technology. That Huberman and modern neuroscience have proven he was right, that your sensitivity isn't a defect. It's a different neurological configuration, that you are not broken. You're operating on a frequency that few can access. This channel exists to reveal these connections that the scientific establishment prefers to hide, to unite the profound wisdom of Jung with the scientific validation of Huberman, to show you that you don't need to choose between spirituality and science, that the two are converging on the same truths, and each revelation costs research, time, risk. When you click the golden heart of the super thanks, you are not just supporting a channel, you are funding the next revelation. You're saying continue showing what they hide. You are not a passive spectator. You are part of a community that seeks truths that others prefer to ignore. Now I need to hear from you. Did you always know you were different, or did you discover it just now? Tell us in the comments about the moment you realized you felt things that others didn't. When you understood that your sensitivity wasn't weakness, but a different way of existing. Your story might be exactly what another rare soul needs to hear today, to finally understand themselves.